My loves are my most secret possessions. There are five total: romantic love, familial love, platonic love, sexual love, and self love. I make a podcast when I have a love so intense I don't know what else to do. Re listening to my podcast reminds me of how powerful my emotions can be, how all consuming. And some would say I'm being dramatic, but I think drama can be fun. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beautifully Nuanced. And happy Valentine's Day, guys! How are you feeling this Valentine's Day? Do you have a Valentine? Do you not? Either way, both of us are able to enjoy this episode, hopefully. Regardless of whether or not you have a Valentine, I hope that you are able to enjoy listening to this podcast, whether that be alone or with your partner. Who knows? In honor of Valentine's Day, I have decided to theme this podcast around love. This was inspired by a movie or set of movies called To All the Boys I've Loved Before. And if you haven't seen it, what are you doing? I highly suggest you watch it. I love this movie so much. But in the movie, Laura Jean makes five love letters to five different boys. Inspired by that, I am making a podcast talking about the five different kinds of love that I have categorized. The first kind of love on the list is romantic love. This is probably the first kind of love that you think about when you hear or see the word love. Romantic love, rom coms, dating, partners, crushes, stuff like that. My thoughts on this is that since romantic love is so easily marketable in like movies, TV shows, etc., there is an overemphasis on romantic love nowadays. You are most likely going to be surrounded by it, whether that be in the media, whether that be in person. It tends to be at the spotlight of what love is. Also, because in a way, for a good part of your adolescence life, or maybe even earlier, there is this idea of finding the one or finding your soulmate. Whether that be in movies, TV shows, there's this idea that you have to look for some sort of life companion, right? So I guess that's why there is such an overemphasis on romantic love. And I guess that's why I've decided that it's the first one I wanted to cover in this podcast. So, for context, last year I was in a relationship. My first relationship, actually. The thing is, I would say it was a relatively healthy relationship and it was a relatively good relationship, even if it did end. For a period of time after I broke up with my partner, there was this phase where I sort of questioned whether or not I was aro, mainly because for a good portion of my life, like prior to this relationship, I really had little to no romantic experiences. Like I did have crushes and stuff like that, or like maybe a few people I was interested in, but I never really experienced romantic love prior to this relationship. So it was definitely new for me. For a period of time after the breakup, I questioned whether or not I was aro, mainly because I was like questioning whether or not I actually was able to feel romantic love. But then I just realized that since nowadays there is such an overemphasis on romantic love, it just made me realize that I was very fortunate enough to be able to embrace all other kinds of love prior to having this relationship. When I used to imagine what exactly romantic love was, like prior to having the relationship, the only real example I had was in terms of course, like married couples that I was surrounded by, or my friends' relationships, or how romantic love is portrayed in movies and TV shows. That was basically how I tried to interpret what love was without actually experiencing it. What I realized during the relationship and sometime after is that it does feel anticlimactic to be in love. The thing is, there's this thing in movies where they portray romance and romantic love as like some sort of explosion. I don't know what I was expecting, but I don't know. I was expecting something very intense when it came to romantic love. But luckily, I was in a very healthy relationship, and it was very calm for me to be in that relationship. And I did enjoy it for the most part while it lasted. So, to whoever's like listening to this and they've like never experienced a relationship or they've never experienced a romantic love yet, the thing is, the way that other people feel it and the way that I feel it is probably going to be different. Like, it isn't as intense as how it is portrayed. I guess like there's a little bit of kilig here and there, but aside from that, it was relatively mellow, which is good. Honestly, if like at certain times, if a love is very intense and there's a bunch of highs and lows, most likely there's just like a rush of a push and pull, and it's not actually like love in that case, it's just toxicity and attachment. Please stay away from toxic people. Don't date toxic people. The next thing I wanted to like cover and talk about in terms of romantic love is the idea of soulmates. And I would love to hear everybody's thoughts on what exactly they think about the whole concept of soulmates, whether or not they believe in them, whether or not they don't believe in them, and why, and stuff like that. Personally, I don't really believe in the idea of soulmates in the way that there is this one person that is meant for you, or like there's this concept of the one that is meant for you. I don't think that your soulmate or your soul has to be completely compatible with one other person in order for them to be a soulmate. Or like, I think that our souls are created individually without the intention of it necessarily being created to complete another person or to complement another person in such an intense way to where they're like your soulmate. Personally, I think that your souls are like individual, and the way that they are able to grow is by being able to interact with other souls and other entities that are on earth, I guess. I do believe in the idea of like karmic partners, wherein if ever somebody were to come into your life, whether that be romantic or whatever, if somebody were to come into your life, they're meant to stay there for the period of time for you to be able to learn a lesson and grow from it. Once you have learned that lesson, or once your time with them is over, that period of time that they're in your life, that could last a couple months, that could last a couple years, or that could last an entire lifetime. So, my idea of soulmates isn't necessarily that everybody has like the one person for them. I think that people could have multiple quote unquote soulmates or like karmic partners, and in each of them, they're able to learn like a lesson from each of them, and they're able to experience new things with them. However, I still do think that people's souls are already complete individually. However, there's a level of evolution that comes with being able to interact with other souls. Wow, that's so fucking deep. Soulmates, souls, your spirit, I guess. The thing is, sort of have this belief that whatever may happen in the future, whether I end up marrying someone and then growing old with them, whether I get married, get divorced, end up having multiple long term relationships after that or something, or if I end up dying alone and dying single. The thing is, I don't necessarily mind any of those outcomes. I think that like the idea of you having to get married and get into a long-term monogamous relationship, it isn't necessarily a standard that needs to be upheld, or it isn't necessarily the blueprint for everybody's life. I think that we as a society should be embracing other kinds of relationships. I see a lot of people on social media sort of demonizing people who get into relationships, quote unquote, for the sake of getting into relationships, or people who aren't, quote unquote, date to marry. Because there are more reasons as to why somebody would like to date, aside from the fact that they want to get married. While it is like kind of fucked up to get into a relationship when you don't really like the person and you're just kind of settling, like that's kind of fucked up. Like you don't necessarily like the person, so you're just like there with them because you don't want to be single. That's very fucked up to do, and like you're leading on the person and you're probably hurting them in the process. Going into a relationship with the goal of getting married and growing old with the person, applying that to every single relationship as the standard of what society and relationships as a whole should be, I think it is very unrealistic, and it takes away like the diversity of like the other kinds of relationships that you can experience. So now, going into relationships, I have this expectation of I will go into them and be with them for the foreseeable future. Does that mean like 10 years down the line? Not necessarily. If it does reach that point, then great. If I see myself being with them within the near future, and I see myself enjoying the next few day to days, enjoying the like day to day life of being with the person, regardless of whether or not we reach the milestone of getting married or growing old together, I think that relationship still holds a lot of value. I read this quote from a book. I'm pretty sure it's from the book 101 Essays That Will Change the Way That You Think. I could be wrong, but that's where I remember it from. It could be like reference from another book, or like it could be reference from somewhere else. So feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. The quote goes, "You'll never know the fullest extent to how much people love you." When thinking about that quote, I started to like reflect on all of the times that I did express love for someone. And I started to think like, even if I try to show like through words or through actions how much I love the person, they will never know the actual extent of how much I feel, or like how much I actually love them. And that is even with like people that you are already able to be affectionate with. What more the people that you are like trying to hide your feelings for, or like the people that you are too scared to like express how much you actually love them. Maybe sometimes you are able to like tell your friends or like tell loved ones in your life like, oh, I have such a big crush on this person, or like I love this person so much, I care about them so much, and they see you be so giddy and so kilig with those with how you talk about that person. Even then, when you're so expressive and vulnerable, I don't think people are actually able to comprehend the extent to which you love the person. Which really makes me think like how many people in my life I didn't necessarily express how much I love them. If you're listening to this, tell that person you love them. Wow. The reverse is also true with this statement. You might think that certain people in your life, they don't love you, or like you feel as though you aren't loved by the people that you are surrounded by, or you feel as though you were never loved at all. Whenever you feel that way, just like sort of remember this quote, that if you love a person so much and even then you aren't able to express the way that you love them, or you're only able to do so within the vicinity of your room or within the vicinity of your private conversations with friends, it doesn't take away the fact that people do love you. So if ever you are feeling as though you aren't loved by people within your life, just try to like remember that. The next is familial love. The thing with familial love, it is not necessarily limited to just blood relation. Could just be a very deep familial bond that you have with people. It could be found families. I split this up into two main types. The first one is parental, and the second one is sibling, like a sibling kind of love. The thing is, with both of them, I am able to experience them with my younger sister, Margaret. I have a younger sister named Margaret, and she is 10 years old right now. The thing is, we have a very big age gap. We have an 8-year age gap. And in certain ways, I'm able to feel sort of like a parental love for her. In a way, I sort of became a third parent for her. I was the main one, like taking care of her and stuff like that. Not to discredit the efforts that my parents put into like raising my sister, of course. You know how, like, as a parent, you do hold this sense of authority over like your younger sibling or like your child. So, since you hold that authority, you have this responsibility to take care of them and maybe in a way coddle them a little bit and be overprotective. There's sort of this urge to just like want to protect them from all of the harms that you see within society, or to sort of try to like shield them from whatever pain there could be found within the world. Since I was older in a way and I did know a little bit more than her, I sort of had this instinct to try to give as much advice as I possibly can. And in a way, like, be the authority figure on whether or not you're allowed to do this or like not allowed to do this. Which in a way it was out of wanting to protect her, but also I realized that as a daughter, when my parents did that, it sort of made me feel strangled in a way. And I realized that the reason why I was able to learn and give advice to begin with is because I was able to experience life for myself without the constant supervision of my parents. At some point, I just had to accept that my sister is going to experience life on her own, and she is going to have to make her own mistakes and learn from them. And I, as an older sister, just have to be there for her if ever she falls down. So that is sort of like the way that I describe parental love, from my perspective. I'm still her sister. So in some ways we were like treated as equals, or I did treat her as an equal, and in certain cases I didn't necessarily hold authority over her, which goes into my other type of familial love, is in terms of a sibling type of love. There are certain times where I'm less of an older sister and more so of just a sister. There are certain times when like Margaret was still quite young, like she was still a baby and she was still like doing kids stuff. While me, I was like already in my like early teen years, to where like I wasn't necessarily allowed to like do certain kid stuff because I was like already too old when I was a kid, like before Margaret was even born. For some reason, I had this idea that I was already too old to be doing certain stuff. I had this idea like at 10, I don't know where it came from, but like I had this idea when I was like about 10 years old, where I was already too old to be playing with toys and I had to be like learning other various different skills. I don't know why I had that idea growing up, but that was just sort of like instilled upon me at an early age. So in a way, I did grow up quite fast. But the thing is, when Margaret was born, I was also like one of the people who was like playing with her and stuff like that, and like taking part in like the interest that she also had. So in a way, like whenever she would like play some games at the mall, or like she would buy certain toys or like play certain games on her iPad because she's Gen Alpha and she's a fucking iPad kid, I was also able to like experience being a kid again whenever I would like spend time with Margaret. Whenever I would like play with her, like both of us just felt like equals. I was able to experience certain things that I didn't experience as a kid. One example I can think of is, you know, those like train things that go around the mall? When I was a kid, I never really got on those. Mainly because I didn't have the courage to ask my parents, because I thought like, oh, that's like too childish for me. Why the fuck did I think that? But like, I thought it was like too childish for me to go on like one of those train things. So I never really had the courage to ask my parents to like go on one of those things, even though I really wanted to experience it. But the thing is, when Margaret was at the age where she could walk and go on those like train things. I was one of the people who also had to go along with her and act as her guardian so like she doesn't fall off the fucking train. I hope that Margaret doesn't listen to this podcast because I'm cussing a lot. If she listens to this podcast when she is like a couple years older, then hi Margaret. Love you so much. Anyways, so like when I like rode on like one of those train things along with Margaret, I was like, oh, I feel like a kid again. In a way, like I was able to like vicariously through my younger sister be able to be a kid again, and I was able to heal my inner child or some shit. The way that you are able to feel love for other people or the way that they are able to feel love for you is either because of like actions that you do for them or the way that you experience like the five different love languages and the way that you're able to experience and show love towards them. It is done through like external actions or it is shown through like personality traits that you have. So like when you ask somebody, why exactly do you love me? Like list down like good qualities that you have as a person, which overall are great. None of these things are necessarily a bad thing. But in comparison to like the love that I feel with my sister is the only person that can probably love me in the most unconditional and pure way. Let's say I achieve something or I do like a nice act for someone or I have like a certain good personality trait that is like admirable. Those things could possibly make the person love me more. While the opposite is also true, if I have like a certain bad trait or I do something quite fucked up, that could lead to a person loving me less. The thing is with my sister, whether I do something good or bad, I know for a fact that it will never change how much they love me. And that is the purest kind of love that I am able to experience. Like, I know for a fact that regardless of how much I fuck up or regardless of how nice I am or how kind I am towards her or regardless of what I do for her, it wouldn't change the fact that she loves me or it would never make her love me more or less than she does. The next kind of love that I have is platonic love. And honestly, this is the kind of love that I'm able to experience the most nowadays. And I am forever going to be grateful for it. Honestly, the reason why I was inspired to make this podcast to begin with was because I rewatched all of the To All the Boys I've Loved Before movies like last week with my friend. He and I stayed here at my place and we just like watched the movies like back to back whenever we would eat dinner or like we would chill and have like a sleepover. That was just like how the both of us would spend time together is by watching like the entire To All the Boys I've Loved Before movies. The thing is, context wise, it does seem like a very intimate setting. I am at home, I am alone with this other person. We're watching a romantic movie, we're like eating snacks, and we're like comfortable around each other. This could seem like a date, but I was just able to feel like such a profound and deep sense of like love and care for this person that I was spending time with. And if that person is listening, hi, shout out to you. Love you so much. But like I was able to be like so comfortable around this person and I was able to be still be like so vulnerable and in a way like intimate with this person, like in a non-romantic sexual kind of way. What I mean by that is like I'm able to have like such a deep level of friendship with this person despite only knowing them for a couple months because I only met this person like during my first semester of college. The fact that I was still able to like have such a deep friendship with this person, I was like I'm so grateful for it. There is this quote that I saw. It was said like in like one of those Instagram, TikTok like street interview things and they asked like what's the best piece of advice you can give someone or something like that. And then this person said that you should treat your friends more like partners and your partners more like friends. And I couldn't agree more. I realize now that I never really had like a negative Valentine's Day experience. All of the Valentine's Days that I had like in the previous years, all of them were relatively positive. The only time I had a romantic Valentine was like last year with my previous partner. But aside from that, the years prior to that, I usually had like Valentine's Day like hangouts and stuff where I would either spend it with my best friend or like my friend groups at the time, and we would like either like watch a movie together and have a movie night, or we would like sort of like set up these games. I remember with my best friend, we had a game. The game was that both of us would write love letters to each of the people that we had a crush on or used to have a crush on at the time. And then we would write a letter for each of them, and we would have to guess like who the letter is for from the other person. That was a really fun game that we had before, which is also inspired by To All the Boys I've Loved Before. Oh, I had that game with my best friend Ira, by the way. So I have a couple videos with her on my channel, so you're free to watch those. To an extent, while I did enjoy having crushes and I enjoyed like liking other people and stuff like that, I already had such like deep and loving friendships prior to getting into a relationship to where like I didn't necessarily feel as though there was something missing in my life. Now that I think about it, I don't necessarily hate Valentine's Day. I just hate couples. And to be fair, I hated couples even when I was in a relationship. For some reason they piss me the fuck off. Like what why are like okay, maybe I just don't like PDA and PDA pisses me off. But yeah. You should be able to have deep and intimate friendships with people regardless of what gender they are, regardless of what gender you're attracted to or what gender they're attracted to, because there is this like okay, this is more of a thing with heterosexual relationships wherein partners are very skeptical if ever their significant other is very close with a member of the opposite sex. There would be like certain exceptions where they would say like, "Oh, they're allowed to have friends of the opposite gender, but they can't be too close or they can only hang out with them in group settings or it can't be one-on-one." If a person is only able to have friendships with a person of the gender that they're attracted to merely because like out of necessity because they're constantly around them and they're not actually able to have like foster a deep connection or a deep friendship with the person, it is inherently misogynistic in a way. This is usually with like heterosexual relationships, but in the case where like your boyfriend isn't able to view women outside of the context of sexual and romantic encounters, it's kind of fucked up and misogynistic in a way. I don't know, if you can't trust your partner with a member of the opposite sex when they're alone and one on one with them, that's kind of a reflection of their character. Or it is a reflection of your own like preconceived biases of what like male and female friendship should look like. Okay, the next kind of love that I'm going to talk about is sexual love, which honestly, it might be the most controversial one from this list. um there is a heavy demonization of sexual love because it is associated with lust and it's seen as sinful and it's wrong and bad. No, regardless of like what kind of sexual experiences you are engaging in, you still have to have a level of care for the person that you are being intimate with. This extends like outside of just having sex after marriage or only having sex in the context of being in a long-term committed relationship. This still extends towards having casual sexual relations with someone. You still have to have a level of care for the other person because of the mere fact that they are another human being. Just the mere fact that you care about their experience while having sex, caring about whether or not they're enjoying the moment as you are. That also extends in the reverse. The other person that you are having sex with, they should also care about whether or not you're comfortable with engaging in it and stuff like that. There's this common like misconception that if you were to view someone in a sexual way, it means that you're like objectifying them. Like having sexual attraction for someone is definitely normal. Of course, don't violate any sort of boundaries from the attraction that you do have. Of course, given that both of you are of a reasonable age gap and both of you are adults, but if both of you are teenagers, hopefully both of you are within the same age range. There is this common misconception that if you were to have like sexual attraction for someone or you view someone in a sexual way, it is automatically objectifying the other person. The like literal definition of objectification is viewing somebody else as an object to satisfy your own sexual urges. The thing is, with sexual love, even if it extends towards casual sexual relationships, it it still has to have a level of care for the other person and like a baseline level of love that you can have for another person, because even if you don't necessarily see like yourself being friends with them or you don't necessarily see yourself being in a romantic relationship with them, you should still have that baseline level of care for the other person, for the mere fact that they're a human being and you are in a very like intimate situation with them and it is likely to be very vulnerable, like even if it's like a casual sexual thing. So the last type of love is self love. My favorite kind, of course. I feel like self love is probably the most neglected type of love on this list. And it is not necessarily people's fault. It mainly has to do with the fact that it is more concrete to be able to love other people like a certain way. Because you know what to expect, you know how to express it. However, with like loving yourself, it is not as concrete or and it is more abstract to where you don't exactly know what exactly to do or like how exactly to love yourself. The way that I like heard like about self-love is like in terms of like the five love languages. I heard this from Tamkor where you show yourself each of the five love languages and that is how you're able to be able to consistently give yourself love and care. So like let's say for example like my love language is quality time. The opposite of giving myself quality time is probably procrastinating or overworking myself. The way that you are able to like counteract that is in terms of like actually taking time to rest and not just like rest as in like doom scrolling or like procrastinating on work that you're supposed to do. Having purposeful winding down time with yourself. In a similar way, when you're like spending time with another person, most likely it's either going to require like a certain level of planning, setting up a date of when both of you guys are free, setting up plans of where you guys are gonna go. And when you're with them, you're being present. You're trying as much as possible to not be on your phone. You're trying to engage in conversation with them. You're getting to know the other person. Both of you are like opening up to each other. Like that's how you are able to express love if you were with like either a partner or a friend or like any other loved one in your life. But in terms of how you express that love for yourself, I think it has to be more intentional if you actually want to achieve a level of self-love or achieve self-love period. I was quite lucky to be able to have like a very strong sense of identity like growing up, or like I was fairly self-loving and confident for a good portion of my life until now. So a lot of these things that I would do was sort of second nature to me, and it was sort of a surprise that other people don't exactly engage in them as much. It was only introduced to them later on in life, which honestly I'm glad that it was introduced to them eventually. When I got into a relationship before, during the relationship, I was still able to like have time to myself. I still allotted certain times where I spent it by myself doing something that I enjoyed. And I think that's why like the relationship I had before, it wasn't necessarily very codependent and I still had like my own independence like within the relationship. Even after the relationship, of course, there was still like heartbreak and stuff like that, and there was still like a process of moving on. Like even after the breakup, I still was able to like continue on my life as normal. It wasn't like my entire the other aspects and areas of my life were completely shattered. I was still able to continue on with my studies. I was still able to continue on with my hobbies. The only difference was I wasn't in a relationship anymore, and I was like coping with that. But luckily for me, I didn't have that problem of like my entire life was like surrounded by my couple, and now that we've broken up, like um I didn't have like my own circle of friends, or like I didn't have my own hobbies, or like anything that was simply for myself and it wasn't shared with my partner, which is like a very common occurrence that I see with other people, which is very unfortunate. And I guess I was like very lucky to like not have to go through that. But if ever you are in the case where you feel as though you are codependent on your relationship, or you feel as though like after the breakup, like you come to the realization that your entire life revolved around your relationship, growing that like sense of self-love and growing your own sense of identity is probably the best thing you can do. And even in the case where you get into a relationship, or you currently are in a relationship that's relatively healthy, that is still something you are able to do regardless, because most likely you don't need another person for that. You shouldn't have another person to do that. The only person that you need to have self-love is yourself. So if ever you feel as though there are barriers to where like you aren't able to love yourself, just know that all of those barriers are imaginary. If you think that having a codependent relationship or having a very close relationship with your partner is impacting that, or impacted that, if you guys broke up, it is probably not. Most of the barriers are up here. So on my story, I put a prompt that said, "What has someone else done that has made you feel loved?" I'll be reading a couple of the entries that were put. This person said that a group of friends organized a surprise birthday party for my birthday. This came from my friend, and I was one of the people who was a part of the surprise, and I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. Another person said that he made me delusional. My stupidity really felt loved that time. That's so real. Let's say, like, whenever you did some stupid shit and you tell your friend about it, and instead of making you feel stupid and shaming you for what you did, they instead enable you and make you delusional of all the stupid shit that you do. And if anything, they'll talk about something even more stupid that they did personally. So it's just like the blind leading the blind. Both of you guys are enabling each other's stupidity. When they know when I feel bad without the need to communicate. That is so true. Like in the cases where you just feel like shit, you don't necessarily want to talk to anyone. You're not necessarily like bringing it to their attention that you feel bad. They are just able to notice the small differences in how you're acting, and like the small like reactions. Like they're able to observe the small differences in your reactions and mannerisms, to where they're able to like identify that, oh, there's something off. Like just the attention to detail is very sweet coming from a friend. This person said, "I couldn't stop crying one week and my best friend gave me a poem. He didn't know about my week." Another case of a person not necessarily knowing about your situation, but the like timing and maybe their intuition just said like, "Oh, I should make a poem for this person." Or like the mere fact that they made a poem for you, the timing was so perfect that it was like while you were having such a tough week. It's so wholesome. I love it. Oh, this person said, "Being told that they're proud of me. They made me feel that I belong and I'm not alone." This was coming from the friend that watched To All the Boys I've Loved Before at my condo. "I'm so glad that you feel as though you belong and you're not alone. You always have a place here at my condo and in my heart." Ay! Uy! Ako lang to. Uy. When they genuinely listened and remembered what I said and put it into action. That's so true. I heard this like saying from like somebody on Reels. It was one of those fucking interview things again. But what they said was, the phrase "I remember" is much more romantic than "I love you." Like the way that they explained it is, if somebody were to remember any small like detail within a conversation, and they are able to remember that and put it into action the next time they have the opportunity to. It is more romantic than the mere phrase I love you. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is actually the second time that I'm recording this podcast because the first time, guess who didn't fucking connect the mic? Ah! Anyways, but yeah. I'm so glad that I was able to record this podcast, and I honestly had such a good time recording it. I hope you had a good time listening to it. Hopefully you have a good Valentine's Day, and I'll see you guys on the next episode of Beautifully Nuanced. Mwah. Bye bye.